Morning, everyone. Welcome to our first talk. We have Stefano, who will be discussing, as it says, tales from the APT world. Stefano is a malware researcher with RSA, and I'll let him take it away.
Okay, you hear me, right? Okay, thank you very much, guys. And as always, I hope in any conference I just apologize for my spaghetti English, but but about that, we will cover today one of the investigation I ran recently. It's related from an attack to a huge, and I say huge, logistic organization carried out by a new, or at least not yet quite known, APT group. And this attack was showing interesting news in terms of strategies in tactics and tools. So it was definitely an argument that I want to discuss in a conference like this. Thank you very much. So the first step of the investigation started with an anomaly recorded in São Paulo, in Brazil, from a standard user in a logistic warehouse where it was loading some lost and found items of expedition that were recovered by people in the warehouse. So during the late shift, this guy was in charge of loading this type of information, and he was basically accessing the website as usual. The website is basically the front end of the database that is shared through the whole organization. The organization is present in about 100 different countries, so it's really huge. But when he was attempting to load info into the website, it was having problem because every time he went into sending something from the UI, it was coming with errors, with strange errors about SQL database. So he decided simply to send an email to his boss saying, "This is a technical problem. I definitely can't finish this. So I will probably shift this activity to the next colleague." The following one was having the same problem, and at one point, the boss, the following day, will escalate the problem internally to the help desk. The escalation took 2 days to pick up, and because it was not really a critical system. But the help desk found, accessing the system, that it obviously was the internal help desk. The backend logs, SQL logs, were disabled. That is not normal, because the standard is to keep the 30 days of logs available for any database in this organization. And through the analysis, they discovered that a number of logins from a service account that it was not related to this system, but pertaining to a different web server in the same data center, were recorded into this. So the anomaly was escalated at this point to the SOC people, and with the initial triage they ran, in the initial analysis they ran, they discovered that there were a number of strange artifacts into the web server from where the SQL database was accessed. So the initial analysis confirmed the suspect compromise, and they will start to collect some items from this situation. But in the end, the people there was not able to correlate events and items they discovered because they were evenly packed. So they decided to escalate the problem to our IR team that was already having a contract with them for the escalation of the second and third tier. So we pick up the call and we pick up the analysis on October 23. And we definitely started with the items that they were showing us, and they have collected before us. So we were having a DMZ machine from where some of the traffic was generated, strange traffic, the São Paulo workstation, and the SQL server. So the DMZ machine was the center of all the initial speculation, because it was the web server and was having a number of different items, interesting items. We started from this point, and we asked the customer basically to give us visibility of systems in the Brazilian data centers using our tool. I'm not just telling you guys, I'm not ads, I'm not a sales guy. So this is not because it's RSA. It will be okay if there is any other type of tool. I mean, last week I went into Detroit to present a triage make through ClamIV. So this is just to let you know about that. But anyway, we were looking for system visibility. We were already having instead network visibility because the solution of RSA was already deployed into this environment. So we extended the full packet collection on other areas of the network not normally touched by this. And we deployed host forensic tool in about 21,000 hosts in a few days. Obviously, we collect artifact recovered, but initial attribution was not possible for a number of reasons I will discuss with you guys. So, forensic analysis made by the other team showed the presence of a number of strange PHP files dropped on August 27 on the web server. Collecting the logs of the web server, the team identified a small number of machines of the development and maintenance accessing the web server. Forensic analysis of this machine granted the identification of another compromised workstation, and the creation modification date of the suspicious file showed that this workstation was infected later than the web server. Analysis on the other DMZ servers on the same block confirmed the compromise, the lateral access of the SQL database, and the compromise was in September 13, 2017. So, these are a number of items that we collected immediately after we have been engaged by the customer. We were just looking to extend the analysis, collecting all the items that were around this segment of time already presented by the customer. And thanks to that, we have been able to collect these items over there. Vast majority is a Mimikatz variants, a number of Mimikatz files. But also a network scanner developed in Go that was really peculiar. There are a number today of Go developed malware, but this one was not yet known by anybody. Compared to our knowledge base, it was not firing any correlation. And an NBT scanner that was in fact a common open source tool, but recompiled for a proper capability to sneak through antivirus. And the last one was a Windows credential editor. Still an open source project, very easy to collect from internet. Okay, we start to focus on the web server. And between the PHP content, we discovered this straight from the collection. There is nothing related to the system. It was just a downloader. This one is a downloader. If you execute this page, you basically can tell through the page to the web server to go collect and download on it a file, simply. And it was used by the attacker to collect his arsenal and to move this arsenal of tools into the system. Luckily for us, we've been able, through the network packet decoder of NetWitness, to collect the initial SQL injection of that day, the 27th of August, where the attacker started the infection. Basically, he checked for to upload a file, a c.txt, in a folder of the web server through a SQL injection that you can notice highlighted by red. And it was successful in doing this. However, because the web server was indexing the content with dynamic content in different pages, after that, he started to look to the page that it has uploaded, the c.txt, and so he started to spend some time. It would take about 5 minutes, but still, he spent some time to go search for this c.txt, and once he found it, he knew that the SQL injection was okay, was working. So from that moment on, he started to upload his real stuff. C.txt was a simple decoy. It was written 1, 2, 3, 4. That's simple as that. And the following one was a China chopper. China chopper is really known. Everybody in the IR field, probably, with a minimum experience of APT, has already faced the China chopper. So I don't want to spend much time on this. China chopper is, however, very powerful. It's common. You can download it. You can collect it. You can even just for the client side, for the client side, you can just collect the script that is available in a number of different websites and just drop this in a file and execute it. So, and load it. So, from the perspective of China chopper, there is not much to say, apart that the following step in the infection was to drop the web shell and to start running it in a system. Unfortunately, because this traffic was into the whole container of the HTTP traffic that was not tagged by our technology as potential malicious at the beginning, we were not able to continue collect the other items after the web shell dropped. So the other will be wasted, because normally our technology have a retention about 1 or 2 weeks. So this was more than a month. However, between the file immediately dropped with the downloader I mentioned before into the web shell powered website, there was this ss.exe that is a backdoor. And this file was found into the web server, but was not active. There was no tracking data of this, but immediately moved into the workstation. Immediately, well, takes some time, but he moved it to the workstation, and in the workstation, he started to use it. At the beginning, this file was packed, and it was potentially not needed malware analysis. Normally, we tend to use malware analysis, especially for heavily packed executable, only once we have the time. At the beginning of the engagement, we were running out of time. I mean, we were considering all the chances of the compromise. We were more interested in identifying other occurrences. So the first thing we went to do is, yes, analyzing it dynamically, but not spend much time into reverse for a moment, just because we need just to understand how it works. So it works in a way that is similar to Netcat, more or less, but it has some very interesting feature. Okay, if you run it through the H flag, it shows you all the potential options, okay? And if you put it in listening with the L flag, it's basically a simple server. I mean, it's a simple vector. But if you try to connect to this vector and send parameters, it doesn't work. It means that if you run this file as a simple vector, it doesn't work as you expect, like in Netcat or other type of vectors like that. So it requires additional elements. I don't want to waste time with this. We will discuss a little bit later. But instead, if you put it in reverse, as a reverse shell, immediately it works. So once we discover that, and you can notice in our lab, this is obviously in our lab, we identify this, and we start to dig into the occurrences of this into the packets, okay? Looking for other commonalities of this behavior in other systems. The first thing that jumped to our eyes immediately after unpacking the malware was that it was coded in Go. Okay, Go is not a new for the malware. The first real powerful Go-powered, Go-developed malware was the Mirai botnet a few years ago. But however, it's something a little bit new in the field of malware to have the development in Go running. But these days, I notice a number of these occurrences. From the perspective of the malware developer, there are some valid reasons to code in Go. First of all, it's difficult to decompile. it's difficult to reverse at the beginning because there is no real debugger, and the decompile needs to be configured accordingly into either Pro or other types of decompilers. But also the symbols, also the configuration of the strings and the common elements are not really immediate to understand. At least for me, that was not really exposed to the Go. Second tool is the NBT scanner. This one is obvious. I mean, it's basically like Nmap with a chance to, it's very small compared to Nmap, sorry. But it got the chance to generate an output that is parsable with other scripts or with other tools. So this is the reason why they use this instead of ss.exe in general to scan, for example, NetBIOS share. So this is a common and easy to collect file. So there is nothing into this that is really peculiar, but still useful to know. 64.exe and en.ps1 were two different flavors of Mimikatz. We know Mimikatz, we know how it works. I don't want to spend much time on this. The only thing that was obviously interesting is that the en.ps1 was stripped. It's a common powersploit tool for the Mimikatz, but it was stripped of all the strings and common items that normally are used by the antivirus to identify the file. So good from them to think about it. And in fact, it is nicked into systems easily, not noticed by the antivirus of the company. However, up to this point, nothing new. I mean, okay, scanners, Mimikatz, but difficult to attribute this to anybody, because not only the APT group, but even the common cyber criminals know about these tools and know how to manage this. So we were looking to something, bigger, something more interesting, something more capable of attribution and classification to understand better where they were looking for. In our, I speak as a team, in our previous experience with APT world, we normally know more or less what is the goal of the attacker based on the type of field the victim is working on, okay? But this is logistics, guys. It's not like aerospace, it's not like defense, it's not like political institutions. It's a logistic company that moves boxes from one place to another, okay? I went into another engagement a couple of years ago where Iranians breached an environment. There was an air flight company, a common air flight company, okay? A travel company. They jumped there just to access databases where the passports are recorded, because they were attempting to infiltrate people, showing record different than the one showed at the airport to the guys on the desk, okay? So it was difficult to attribute. I mean, it was difficult to think at the beginning because it was complicated to understand the flow that goes into this system that was not into the company, but was just connected to the company, okay? But this one was extremely more complicated because there is no chance to start with something. Even when we ask manager, who can target you? Okay, cyber criminals? Yes, totally. Okay, because credit cards are in a number of these databases, in a number of transactions. So yes, but the way they behave, the way they target this particular data center, this particular set of machine, was not really Brazilian cyber criminal gang. Okay, it was difficult to attribute to them. So we start to dig in a little bit into the question. And by generating a number of IOC based on ss.exe and based on the other items, we basically discover a number of other occurrences, a number of other tools. These are explained like there. Okay, some of them apparently are not really malicious. I mean, this Sandboxie DLL was the problem. I mean, it's also often used as a first layer of protection, Sandboxie, especially for the browser. In a number of situations, I noticed this. So But in this case, there were not the entire Sandboxie application running on the system, just a number of DLLs and just one executable. So, and it was not the entire executable, not the entire deployment of Sandboxie. However, there were others, like debug srv.exe, that was another malicious tool, evilly packed, using VM Protect to encrypt, very complicated to reverse. And there was this strange file that was explore.dll. Okay, explore.dll, there is also a version that is legitimate, okay? But this was not. Compared to the real one, totally different. So we start to think, okay, these tools are, these items are strange. But we go forth. We move to this workstation, where all the real problems were generated, because this workstation was extremely active in the last 30 days since the beginning of the engagement. So since the beginning of the attack, sorry. So going there, we found a number of additional items, but in general, two were the folders where the infection was residing. One was in C perflog, not new, and another in Windows debug. Deeper analysis on the system showed that immediately after attacking this box, the attacker removed every log. Okay, it's kind of like putting a sign onto this. Basically, from this system, a number of lateral access were executed. This was against the file server that was shared between the workstation and the systems in the Brazilian environment, not the data center, but the internal between workstation. Okay, we were considering the chance that the beginning of the infection of the workstation was done by Windows exploit, Windows vulnerability, NetBIOS vulnerability, something like that. But a number of problems were negating this possibility, especially one, the DMZ and the internal system were segregated by tiers of firewalls. And SMB was not available. So NetBIOS was not a chance for this, okay? So we start digging into, and thanks to the WMI scripts and the forensic tool, we were able to identify the execution of basically ss.exe, the tracking of ss.exe, that started from the drop of these two and all the arsenal in the .dat file from a Java application. So definitely they have used a vulnerability of Java to achieve the control of this box. And in fact, they have used the actually known CV 2017-10-346. That is basically a vulnerability for the old version of Java, and this machine was running 1.6, so old, okay, where you basically force through drive-by download the infection of the machine. You just need to create a page, rising a Java exception into the machine, rising the Java virtual machine, the machine goes, and then you can be able to, interact with the system. All other items discovered into the system, into the workstation, a number of other accesses, but two in particular were important. One, access to the ADSM console of the ASA firewalls into the environment, the ones of the local Brazil. And the one was the system that was used as a jambox for contractors to work in the DMZ. Okay, so in both cases, interesting item to discover. And frankly, we start to considering this APT because the way they behave, the way they used to move was definitely not something in the end of the common cybercriminal. We have experience of different cybercriminal, more advanced, like Carbonac, stuff like that, and it was potentially comparable to that. But Carbonac normally use specific tools that we know. and nothing of that happens on our eyes, rise on our eyes, the attention. So once we notice the scan, once we notice the remote access, we also notice that vast majority of the system accessed, laterally accessed, once interesting for a reason, were also infected. But all the system were having updated antivirus, a number of other tools in place. So we were starting to question how that happens. I mean, without any sign on the antivirus console, without any sign of logs on the CM, without any other additional potential anomaly recorded before that guy with the access to the database. Okay, so start to think about this. And by the way, looking into the Sandboxie stuff, we just noticed another element that is the Sandboxie rpcss.exe. That is basically one component of the execution of Sandboxie. So, go back a little bit about Sandboxie. It's a program designed to protect systems. It's a program designed to sandbox the execution of an application. And if you know how Sandbox works, basically it creates an environment that is almost segregated, where the single application is detonated. So in general, my personal opinion in this, at the beginning at least, is if I am an attacker, I don't try to force the firewall. I don't try to force a security tool to achieve a control of a system. I can have a number of other options. But think about it. In this environment, the average protection was good from the endpoints perspective. Okay? So having this average good protection, the attacker wants to rely on something that he knows, and that probably is not known to the vast majority of people. So once even you have an anomaly, before you think about that anomaly as correlated to an attack, you think twice. You probably look to other items more than that. Okay? So from a certain point of view, if you have the chance to exploit in a way or another the Sandboxie, and Sandboxie is considered legitimate in the environment, why not? One item that immediately jumped on our eyes doing malware analysis and comparison between the tools related to Sandboxie discovered in the system and the typical Sandboxie environment, the typical Sandboxie program, was the sbe.dll that is one of the main components of Sandboxie. Comparing the DLL between the typical DLL for that particular version. Okay, so the same exact version that the Meta were presenting, and the ones that we have, the malicious one was extremely more light. It was including a number of typical APIs and instructions that are in the main API, in the main DLL, but it was having a couple of different components that were not into the typical Sandboxie DLL. We start to think about that. And by the way, on the 6th of August of that year, 2017, on internet, a CVE related to Sandboxie was published, related to a vulnerability into the Sandboxie installer. So things were aligning a little bit. The attacker executed the attack on 27th of August, 20 days, almost 20 days later. Okay? So the typical Sandboxie execution of the installer is expressed like that. I don't want to waste much time. It's for posterity. But basically, when you have downloaded the Sandboxie and you want to install it, you simply click. Files that are downloaded are dropped into the temp. From temp are moved into the program file folder. Then from that, a number of these items are executed in order to finalize the setup of the system and then start. The weakness relies on the execution at the beginning of the drop of the file into the temp folder. if during this particular step I subvert a number of DLLs, I can basically let the Sandboxie execute different behavior than normal. The Sandboxie will be installed apparently normal, but in fact, once I execute, launching the Sandboxie executable, if I linked into the Sandboxie DLL, the sbe.dll, additional, I don't know, comments, additional code, that code will be executed. Just one step to highlight. In the boxes we have analyzed, Sandboxie was not installed at the beginning. So the original executable of Sandboxie was not present. So from a certain perspective, it's okay, the vulnerability. It's okay that we have the DLLs that are different and probably the ones that are abused to execute malicious file, but Sandboxie was not into the systems. So we were looking to the Sandboxie executable into the system, and the typical executable Sandboxie was not available. So the next step of the attacker tactic was to create the condition exploiting this particular part, as I told you, the temp file, subverting that, strip Sandboxie temp file of all the items that are not needed, and create a small package that executed through console, load the Sandboxie process that is signed, that is allowed into the environment, but immediately after execute malicious code. That's the passage that the attackers have make into his. Looking into the code of the Sandboxie sdbi.dll, we notice that explore.dll, that was malicious, that we have already identified, was raised as and hooked into the sbe.dll dynamic library during the execution. Also, another function was called, but in case where it's not available, not executed, that is called myload.dll. We investigated a little bit about myload.dll because we weren't having any chance to find. There was not available in any of the infected system. And by speaking with a different company, we found that in environment, they were having almost the same situation, but they have collected myload.dll, and myload.dll was a variant of Tesla crypt used to wipe out all the items in the system. So if you drop myload.dll and you execute against Sandboxie, immediately that particular DLL will cancel securely, so with double passage, all the files in the system that are pertaining to the infection. That's the goal. So they have the explore.dll that is basically the first stage of the infection after the Sandboxie. And if you drop myload in the same folder, is the explorer executed, but again, myload is executed as well, and basically wipe out the entire folder. So leaving no trace, okay? Okay, I told you, this is how they make possible the host escape. Obviously, we need to consider one aspect. The Sandboxie process executed by this attack is not completed. So it's not really a complete sandbox available. So this is also the reason why they use this as a trampoline to infect. Because basically they have incapacitated Sandboxie to really block occurrences like a normal security tool does. They just use it because creating the process of Sandboxie that is signed, they can bypass a number of items. And because for the way Sandboxie works, the resources in memory are declared on the environment and are static, they can achieve a control that is better than standard because the address space layout randomization is not working, the one that is provided by the operating system. So they can basically leverage on this to have the chance to run their malware. In the end, if you drop this set of tools, this set of files with explore.dll, and you rename the function of the explore.dll that loads the second stage, you basically can execute a different malware, potentially. The malware that they have executed is debug.srv.exe. This is evilly packed, as I told you, I have anticipated. It's a backdoor able to have keylogging, info stealing capability, a number of capabilities. But in the end, it's a Trojan. Unfortunately, we haven't found any correspondence between this malware and other items we have in our knowledge base. This probably don't mean anything, but we have a relatively huge database of files and malware. So we normally, once we proceed in creating IOCs or in creating components to investigate our database, if there are even just correspondences of segment of code, they normally jump up, even if false positive. But in this case, absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing. This is also the reason why, not only having problem in classification, we will consider this a different APT, group. And we echo some of the conclusion that Trend Micro and Kaspersky have reached about a new APT group that is basically not really interested in geopolitical stuff, but more into cyber criminal sponsored activities that is called Chasing Other. And there was having basically the same type of mechanism of subverting the system using different application, not this Sandboxie, but really similar to this. So we have, for this, just concluded that potentially we are facing the same attacker. Absolutely not sure about this, and consider this obviously just a speculation, a pure speculation. But still, Chasing Other in the reports of Kaspersky and Trend Micro show the similar capability. Mainly focused on Windows, mainly focused on, leveraging on Windows application vulnerability, DLL hijacking to overcome the standard protection of the systems in order to run their tool. Tools that are almost heavily packed, heavily encrypted. They normally change easily and quickly their C2s. They use algorithm, domain generation algorithm for, having the chance to skip the typical network IOCs. Okay, this is for posterity, just a small number of Yara rules we have developed. I just want to spend 1 second with this. We normally don't create Yara in a way that is fire and forget. So we normally tend to create Yara that stays in our knowledge base in order for us to help in the attribution also. So these Yara are atomics, but we are developing different ones based on a number of samples collected from different companies with different malware researchers in order to realize a Yara that is not only able to catch malware where it is, but also to correlate by firing different samples in different parts of the world. Excuse me. Don't move. Okay. This is the timeline of the incident. We have just put into this timeline the most important elements we have identified, because there are a huge number of systems you can see in the following slide. We were having about 273 systems analyzed, and about them 266 were touched or infected. But we have just briefly identified some items into this timeline that are important to consider. So the first part, just make the same path that I have described. Another item that was interesting was that at one point, the attacker, identifying the ADSM, the console of Cisco ASA, identified the Radius server behind the VPNs. So he immediately spent all his effort to reach this Radius server that was an Active Directory system. a Microsoft system. And so by leveraging on the password they have stolen earlier, they have been able to create custom users with a number of different profiles in this ID. And from that point on, they stop using their backdoors. They just access through VPNs. And they have attempted to move laterally, not just in the Brazilian or in South America. They try to move into US and EMEA data centers, looking for real things, looking for data. And just in this moment, from that moment on, we understand a little bit better what they have in mind. Because they totally skip any interest in financial data. They were able to collect credit cards at one point. They don't care. They simply don't download this type of information. They started to focus on a number of shipping contracts. Specialized shipping contracts dedicated to Africa, where a number of these contracts were related to UN organizations. I don't want to go further in this because obviously means discussing something that is still under non-disclosure agreement, still under investigation, but just let you know that they were looking to understand how the UN is moving gear into conflict area in Africa, especially in Central Africa, where on the other hand, China is really interested in buying lands. That's all. This is still for posterity, is a simple stat of the whole project. So we started on late October. At the time, a number of systems were already compromised. We have basically concluded the investigation, the triage, in about 30 days. At one point, going back to the timeline, on the US part, we have identified the exfil about this project I told you about. So we have corrupted the archives as normally is intended to do to avoid further breaches. But on the other hand, they insist and insist and insist, and we kept them working up to the moment when we were able to scope the entire infection and remove them. Okay? They have attempted few weeks later to come back using almost the same tactic in a different data center, but it was already under our eyes, so it was easy to diffuse. Okay, I have anticipated this. The remediation was basically running host forensic analysis, triage, and distributing IOCs, atomic IOCs, on the entire environment. Looking for infections, looking for the presence of any malicious activity. We haven't really studied much the logs apart for the machines already touched, because we know they probably have even laterally moved to other systems, but it was difficult for us to scope the logs. Often these logs were just not enough to allowing us to dig into because the logs were rolled out. So we have mainly focused on items like the files, like the network behavior to realize the triage. One lesson that we learned from this, if it was needed, but definitely was okay, is just not to think in a way that is a standard, because the attacker normally think to how to diffuse the standard way of thinking. So that's the thing. Thank you very much, guys, for that. If you have any question, I'm available. Time's okay?
We'll record the questions if I have any questions.
Yeah, of course. Okay. Do you have any question, guys? Please.
With the level of sophistication here, and without saying a whole lot, would you believe that this was a state actor?
Okay, good question, and I would just say probably not. I mean, probably they are a very skilled set of individuals, okay? Probably coming from the cybercriminal world, but not the one that is in hacking forums, standard hacking forums, stuff like that, but really, really good. And the way they diffuse the protections and the capability that they've showed in terms of development definitely put them in a higher set and small set of very dangerous group. But definitely it's sponsored in a way that they, at that time, were working for somebody. Okay. I don't know if they are cyber mercs or not. In other investigation that I anticipated by Trend Micro and Kaspersky, they have stumbled in these guys in two other companies, private companies, and they were not looking into copyrighted material, but more into how the money moves, but not stealing credit cards. That's the point. More financial data, something that you can use to blackmail people, stuff like that. So they were, if confirmed they were the same, they were looking into items that normally are used by the politics still. Okay. In this case, this is just the beginning, because after that I was engaged by the UN organization, and we discovered part of these guys in the environment as well. So this is something really, really big in a way that is developing at the moment. One question, one element that is interesting, however, is this one. One second. Oh, sorry. Okay. It's my right hand. Okay. So here, somewhere, sorry. There are some references to Chinese language from the browser. So that browser was Taiwanese or Chinese or Chinese language powered. So, something that let us think. But in the Kaspersky case, the language was not Chinese. So we're still in doubt, not confirmed. Okay? Other questions? Please.
So with the initial SQL injection, was it related to any known CVE or known framework, or was it seemingly custom?
No, it's not custom. It's, well, the c.exe was obviously created by on the fly, okay? But this was a standard SQL injection against Windows powered Apache server. Very vulnerable because it was version, if I remember correctly, but it's showed somewhere. It was 2.4 or something like that. So it was vulnerable, that's for sure. And in fact, this was one of the weakest links in the entire organization. Unfortunately, we are not aware of this version. They haven't analyzed this in the previous penetration testing and vulnerability assessment that they have run. So unfortunately, this is the occasion. Other questions? Please.
For the infrastructure, did you guys track it back? Like, what was their CNC?
Okay, we haven't been able to show you CNC because it's still under investigation. 2 points, however. One of the C2 was in a very peculiar Chinese provider that is not really common. I mean, this provider owns just 6 or 7 segments of C class, so very small, okay? And it's a virtual private host, okay? The other one instead was in a French environment, a known huge provider of VPS services. One of the first things when we go into an environment and look for packets is to go for country, China, and the other is this particular ISP in French because it's very famous for holding a number of situations in the past. They have an abuse that is definitely not working much. So if you send a request, they don't cooperate at all. And they know.
So for the network communication with CNC, did you find that it was encrypted like static key or
No. Yeah, the problem was that the bug.srv, because this is the only element that is actually really communicating, It's funny because it basically has a cycle that runs and then can be modified on the fly with a command. So it runs for after 30 seconds, it starts beaconing, okay, for a minute or two. And if the answer, it collects answer from the other side will reply saying 6 minutes. Then the following will be after 6 minutes, 12 minutes or whatever. So from that perspective, it's very peculiar. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to show you guys this because still, as I told you, is still under investigation. The communication were in SSL, unfortunately. So it was a little bit complicated to solve, and we are still working on that. But definitely, there are some commonalities in the beaconing way. So there are a number of content we have developed for our technology that is able to pick up the presence of the beacon. Following the beacon, when the commands are sent, still investigating on this. Not really easy to achieve the control upon this set of communication stuff. Please.
It sounds like if they had implemented whitelisting, that would have pretty well shut this attack down, wouldn't it?
Related to the Sandboxie stuff, they use Sandboxie, so they can't blacklist Sandboxie in their environment. And unfortunately, if you blacklist the application running in Sandboxie, you don't achieve a real block because basically Sandboxie presents the process Sandboxie for executing the malware. So from that perspective, it's not really a way to block the infection. Whitelisting, we normally don't consider that really a solution. For a number of reasons that you can understand. Okay? Any other question? Thank you very much, guys.